Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another Sikh Spectrum. Today we've come to London, Temple, a place where not too far from the Old Bailey and the High Court. And the simple reason that we're going to interview one of our top Sikh QCs. So let me introduce them first. Malkit Singh Gill, who is a QC and has been for many years, and this interview will talk about what they've achieved and what they've done. So Malkit, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Malkit, let's start by asking you to give us a short profile about yourself.
Well, I was born in New Delhi. I came here at a young age, grew up in the Midlands, and then came down to London, to University College here to study. And then having done my law degree, I then stayed down here, and because the legal profession is centred around London for the most part, and I've been practicing law ever since.
Did you always want to become a lawyer then?
Well, no. I thought about the law, I think, in the mid-70s when I was at school, and I think my science teachers thought I wasn't really going to be very good at science, so they suggested, why don't you try something easier like the law?
Okay. So, but what about your parents? Do they want you to, you know, like most Sikh parents, you know, go into the doctor banjo?
No,
you weren't under pressure.
They put no pressure on me whatsoever. My parents said, well, do what you feel you enjoy. I think at that time, when having come to this country in the mid-60s, and growing up in this country, growing up in a city area like Birmingham, I could see tensions around me, and these tensions were also live at school also. And I think that part of the reason why I wanted to become a lawyer was a sense of injustice as well. And that has always motivated me in what I've done. And when I began thinking about careers, and people thought, well, you're probably not going to be an astrophysicist even though you're interested in it, what about the law? And I found that fascinating. And so that's really why I went into it.
Now, you're an international human rights lawyer, is how you were described. Can you just explain the difference between, you know, what does that exactly mean? Because people usually think it's about rights, but what does it actually encounter?
Well, this is quite a complex topic, but very briefly, what I tend to do for the most part is to look at how human rights principles emerge in international law, in treaties, in your declarations, etc., and take those principles and rights and try to make them effective at a local or a national level. That may be in this country or it may be in other countries, and not all countries try to implement those human rights principles as effectively as others. But you know, that is what I really enjoy doing, translating those principles from an international level to the law at a local level. And this pans itself out into a range of different fields. The fields don't particularly matter. I mean, it could be I don't know, some education case, it could be an immigration case, it could be a criminal case. It doesn't particularly matter, because the principle, for instance, your right to a fair trial, your right to a private life, your right to liberty, your right to freedom from degrading treatment, your right to non-discrimination. All these things can apply in a range of different fields. And if you understand those principles, then you can apply them to a lot of different fields.
You don't actually defend cases as such for human rights. So the level that you're talking about is very sort of high level rather than defending individuals.
Well, we all had to start at a lower level, you know. So I've done all of that. So when I started, for instance, I did a lot of criminal cases, and in those situations, obviously, you're defending a person. But that term defense can mean different things in different contexts. So yes, I have defended people accused of crime, including some notable Sikh cases. I still continue to do some of that, but not your normal Crown Court trial, for instance. The sort of defending I do is when somebody is sought to be extradited by one country to another, and the individual needs some advice and some defense from that extradition, or there's some issue relating to transnational movement of individuals or transnational movement of businesses, which raises criminal issues as well. And these sort of things you could say, well, I'm trying to defend somebody against something. But it's not like your normal Crown Court trial. If you're thinking of going into a court, is the judge going to lock you up or not? Right. It's not that sort of defense. Okay. It's often appellate work that I tend to do.
Okay, I do want to talk about 1984 and issues here in the UK. At that time, obviously, a lot of people were, upset with what was happening. So there must have been a number of issues with Sikh organisations and individuals. Did you get involved in any of that, in those activities?
Well, there was no way that you could avoid being involved. I had only started my practice fairly shortly before that, hadn't really got started, and this issue arose, and it shook the whole month to its core. And it was, I think, a very important moment for me that night when phone calls started arriving as to what's happening at Harbandar Sahib. And immediately the next day there was activity. People were getting together, forming this ad hoc group or that ad hoc group. I think that energy was very important. It doesn't matter how many groups you form. Sometimes the groups cut across each other, but no matter. The fact that people were doing this, I think, was great. What I particularly got involved with was activity from a human rights perspective. And fairly soon we began to see that there were a number of people who were coming out of the Punjab, those who'd managed to escape and flee, because as you know, Punjab was closed down, and there was news blackouts and so on, and a lot of young men were targeted and had to flee, and they fled in horrendous circumstances, made their way to this country, and a lot of us got together and spoke to these individuals, took witness statements from them, catalogued cases. For days on end we did nothing but this, and then prepared dossiers in order to submit to what was in those days certain UN procedures. Those procedures have been updated now, so I won't bore you with the procedures. Submit the complaints to the relevant working groups of the United Nations at that time, and try to create pressure through one way or another. So I got involved with it essentially from the human rights angle. That, of course, led on to, I wasn't expecting it, but it led on to a number of cases as well in this country.
But were you defending them on terrorist charges or asylum seekers or what?
Those people who came at that time were all refugees, or claiming to be refugees, or even not wanting to surface at all. So they needed assistance. If they didn't want to surface, they're entitled to take that position. But they needed assistance. And some very important people at that time, but that's what we did in relation to them. But a number of other people who were in this country, as you know, at that time there was a lot of activity, and there were a number of criminal charges and criminal trials brought during the 80s as well against Sikhs.
Okay, so I mean, just to finish on that topic about 84, I mean, we still haven't got the justice, that was required. Was there, I mean, all the dossiers, all the information that you had gathered, did that actually fall on deaf ears, or did it actually get us anywhere?
Well, the dossiers that I'm talking about are the people who were victimized in Punjab itself. And those materials had this impact, that it actually brought the matter to the attention of relevant bodies of the United Nations in a way which they could understand. In other words, there was a properly catalogued case, properly supported with such corroborating evidence as we could get. So it had that impact. It started that ball rolling of creation of strategies or the implementation of strategies, and gave rise to this, I think, gave rise to various subsequent institutions thereafter which have acted in the human rights field. Not only that, there were then, so far as I think what you're talking about is the, in terms of justice, is what happened in Delhi after June '84 in Delhi, the pogroms that took place against the Sikh community. Now, those people, of course, didn't get out. They were killed there. And it was the local lawyers there who tried to assist them and try to build up those campaigns. What we could do from abroad was try to see how we could try to put pressure through international channels on the campaign for justice, which had to take place there for those people. And there has been over the years, through the activity of some very good lawyers in Delhi itself and activists there has been some movement, some compensation given, but of course nowhere near enough, and far, far too late, and not widespread enough either.
Let me talk about some of the, Sikh issues that we've had here, especially with the some of the cases that have just come to my mind regarding the Air India case or others. Were you involved in those at the time?
I wasn't involved in the Air India case, but there were a number of others that I was involved in those days. As I said, I did a lot of criminal work in the normal sense. And for instance, there was the conspiracy to murder Rajiv Gandhi, the former Indian Prime Minister. And this is before he was in fact killed, but there was a conspiracy allegedly, well, it was proven, in this country to murder him when he came here. And so we had a 3-month trial in relation to that, which was a very long trial. And most of the defendants got convicted in that case. But that, at that time, led to a great deal of angst within the Sikh community in the Midlands, because this was a Leicester-based case. The trial, however, took place in Birmingham because of, I think they didn't want it in Leicester because there would be tensions. And yet the community was out in force, on the streets in Birmingham as well. And then there were 2 or 3 others after that, which those people who have got the archives from the time will know about, shootings at gurdwaras and in Luton and places like this, and 1 or 2 others. I did a number of those cases.
Right. Okay, let me move on away from that topic actually for a second and talk about, as Sikhs, is there a group of lawyers? Do you have like a Sikh lawyers group, like you have, black and ethnic minorities? Is there one for Sikhs in the law field?
Well, this is something that has always been a source of some disappointment. We don't have one. I think people every now and then have tried to set one up, but for some reason or another it hasn't worked. I, for my own part, and also together with others, have tried to encourage young Sikhs, lawyers, to get involved with human rights-based activity of one sort or another. It needn't be quite the sort of things that I'm talking about. Human rights, as I said earlier, there are a lot of broad principles which need to carry over in a lot of different fields.
I mean, we have had, judges, 2 judges especially that everyone knows about. Obviously, yes. Judge Malkit Singh, who's retired now. And so, I mean, do you think that represents the right number of Sikhs? I mean, 2 is quite a lot, I think. Or is that not enough, do you think, in terms of how many are coming through?
Well, I don't think it's an awful lot in terms of the numbers of Sikhs within the legal profession. in terms of the number of Sikhs at the bar, that is, those who are barristers, it's perhaps not bad at all, because, as I said, there are not that many Sikh barristers,
Right.
or not that many who put themselves out as Sikh anyway. But amongst the legal profession generally, there are a lot of people from the Asian communities, and the talk is that maybe we should open up the judiciary to not just people from the bar, not just barristers, but solicitors, academics, and so on. To some extent that has happened, but still not fast enough.
Okay, but, you know, sometimes the cases that are done, do you think that they'd be better off with a Sikh judge if it was a Sikh case?
One would like to think it would make absolutely no difference.
Right.
Whether I think the question really has to be looked at in this way. If a judge, whatever the religious or cultural or racial background of the judge, if the judge is able to understand the issues before him and what gave rise to those issues, because sometimes it can be issues which somebody who is far removed from the community, from that particular community, may not understand. For instance, if I was sitting as a judge in relation to some issue involving the Kurdish community, for instance, I may not fully understand all the nuances. But that doesn't mean that I should not sit as a judge in relation to that, or somebody else may not. So I'm not sure that the question ought not to arise, but you can broaden out the question in a number of different ways, I'm sure.
So let me ask you a personal question. Would you like to become a judge yourself in time? I mean, it's like the pinnacle in terms of the judiciary system.
Well, it rather depends what you want out of life. After Malkit Singh, I was the next one who was a turban wearer who became a QC. I became a QC in 2000 at the age of 39, which was young compared to most people, and most people who are appointed are not are of the white community, and they are usually in their 40s. If not more than that, but usually mid-40s. So 39 was a young age. And I've been a QC for now 14 years, nearly 15 years. And if I'd wanted to become a judge, I may have done something about it sooner, but it's a question of temperament. I quite like the idea of actually fighting for individuals.
What about, have you had issues in the law profession because you've got a turban and a beard? Do you think there's some discrimination going on?
There always has been, and I think there will continue to be. It may be more subtle, it may be more restrained, but that will always be there, I think. I certainly had it as a youngster because starting off, walking around the temple, I was the only one with a turban. Malkit Singh was already a judge by that stage. And there was Harjit Singh and Malkit Singh Chauhan. Those were the two senior Sikh barristers who wore turbans at that time. I was the only one after that. And then in the late 80s, mid-late 80s, 2 or 3 others came along, and that was good. But even then, there's been relatively little. I remember because I didn't wear a wig, I was in court once, in the company's court as it happened, and the judge asked me, "Are you a solicitor or a barrister?" Because in those days, solicitors, and they still don't wear wigs when they go into court, and barristers did. And so comments like that, I found a little bit difficult, but you have to ride over those sort of things. And the attitude of the judiciary towards non-white barristers in those days was harsher and more dismissive. So one had to fight against all of that, which is why in those days I was very active in a lot of initiatives in the legal profession to try to change the code of conduct and try to make, discrimination, race discrimination, disciplinary offences. Nowadays we take that sort of thing for granted, but we had to get resolutions passed at the Bar Council to make that sort of thing contrary to the code of conduct, Right. And so there were those sort of things in the 80s that we had to do. Now it can be a little bit more subtle, because people still tend to gravitate towards those who look like them, and solicitors and judges who have grown up with that tradition still may harbour those sort of feelings. But the senior judiciary all know me on first name terms, because I appear before them all the time, and so I get respect from them now, but I've had to fight for it.
Right. So what advice would you now give, as we're coming near to the end of our interview, anybody that's studying law? Would you give them, what sort of advice would you give them in this profession?
Well, if you want something badly enough, you can get it. It is very difficult, but you can get it. The legal profession, the bar at any rate, is contracting, and more people will leave the profession of barrister over the years because of changes in structural changes within the profession, which we don't have time to go into. This makes getting even a foothold in the profession as a barrister difficult. But if you're good and you want something badly enough, you can carve out a practice for yourself in those areas of human rights and related areas, if that's what you're interested in, if you really want it, and that's what I've had to do.
Okay, so just touching on one point where the issues that you've had, the youngsters coming through now won't have the same type of discrimination, because you've taken the brunt of all that, or people before you. So do you still think it's a good profession to be in? Those that are studying, because a lot of people studying in university law suddenly take a different profession when they come out.
Well, a law degree is, I think, always worth having, because it provides a sound basis from which to move into a number of different careers. But if you go into doing a law degree thinking that you've got a high chance of becoming a solicitor or a barrister, just exercise a bit of caution about that, because there is a high dropout rate in terms of translating the degree into actual, practice. That's difficult. But a law degree it's more difficult now. When I started, it wasn't difficult getting into the profession. Whether anybody would treat you rightly in the profession was another matter, but you could get in. Now it's even more difficult because the competition for places is so high.
Okay, and my last question is about a lot of people that I interview, like yourselves in this sort of professions, are not involved in gurdwaras at all. Do you want to shed some light to me why it is that people like yourselves don't get involved in gurdwara? They go to gurdwaras, but they just don't get involved.
Well, I think it's probably because people who are professionals have managed to get something out of life. They've managed to achieve something. People who run gurdwaras find that is the way in which they have managed to achieve something. They may be people from local business communities, and this provides them with a form of, some of them, I'm not talking about all of them, with some form of kudos, some form of status. Quite apart from that, which I think is perhaps a human failing, there are other reasons. The other reasons are that there is a restraint amongst professionals in getting involved in what they tend to see as party politicking in gurdwaras. This is something we really do need to break, and there needs to be an understanding that local business interests, local Sikh business interests, and local Sikh professionals need to work much more closely together. And I think despite what your question says, I think things are changing. There are more professionals getting involved in some gurdwaras, maybe not changing fast enough, but they are changing. And then there are others who will help behind the scenes. I'm not directly involved in gurdwaras, but I may help indirectly behind the scenes.
Okay, well, look, Manjeet, I want to thank you for allowing us to use your office and interview you at number 5 Chambers. I think it's great, and I hope that people who are studying law will get some sort of insight what you've talked to them today. So let's do Fateh together. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.